Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is former Congressman Charlie Dent. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me again.
Hey, great to be with you. Great to be with you, Brittany.
It was a pretty big night last night. Vice President Kamala Harris faced off against former President Donald Trump in their first presidential debate in Philadelphia. So, after watching the debate, after sitting with it for a little bit, what are some of your takeaways?
Yeah, my big takeaway was that, I thought Harris, won rather decisively. Now, the reason why I say that is because, she came across as, competent, capable. She spoke very well. And Trump came across as agitated and angry and undisciplined. And she scored some pretty big points on women's reproductive rights. She was pretty effective in making that case. And she was very good, frankly, at triggering Trump. She triggered him. She really was good at trolling him, and she kept bringing up issues you knew that would get his attention. You're about the crowd sizes. People leave your rallies early because they're bored and exhausted. Talking about former staffers who said he was a disgrace, and just went down a long litany of issues that certainly would set him off. And then he did some other things too that were acts of self-destruction. Bringing up these immigrants eating cats and dogs, eating the pets of folks in Springfield, Ohio. I mean, none of this stuff helped him. So I thought she just came across as a lot stronger, and he just, as bad as it was. I mean, she was good, but he was bad. He was just terrible. I mean, if they had a normal Republican candidate in there going toe to toe, it probably would have been, he said, she said, kind of a draw type of thing. But with him, it was very one-sided.
Congressman, you're saying that former President Trump didn't have a strong debate performance, but as we know, back in June, President Biden did not have a strong debate performance either, and that was ultimately the catalyst which led him to leave the race. Do you think President Trump's performance was as bad as Biden's was back in June?
Well, bad in a different kind of way. Many people, as soon as they watched Joe Biden, felt that he had a diminished capacity, that he wasn't really up to serving for 4 more years. Now, you can make a case, too, that Trump has a diminished capacity, but I have to give credit to the Democrats. They saw the problem with their nominee, and they replaced him. Many Republicans know Donald Trump is a seriously defective candidate, but nobody wants to tell him he's got to get out of the race. And that's the difference between the two parties. The Democrats are very serious and intent on winning. And I've said for some time the Republican Party is not serious about winning anymore. When you see the results of all the elections post-2016, after Donald Trump, we got slaughtered in the House in 2018. In 2020, we lost the Senate and the presidency. 2022, Republicans significantly underperformed. And it just seems that, let's stay with that guy, who's been dominating the party and brought nothing but defeat. And so why do we expect something better to happen in 2024? We can't get strong candidates to run in many cases, because they don't want to deal with the crazy primary pressures and being pushed by the fringe to go to extremes, egged on by Trump, who has endorsed people like Doug Mastriano and other very seriously defective candidates who, of course, have lost in battleground and swing states. So that's why I say the party's not so serious about winning anymore. They're more serious about pandering and placating Donald Trump, making him happy at the expense of their own electoral outcomes.
We know how tight this election is. They are in a dead heat. They're neck and neck according to pretty much every poll. And you brought up a point that you said back in June to me, that the party has seen nothing but defeat since Donald Trump won. After watching his debate performance on Tuesday night, are you concerned that he's going to affect Senate races and House races too?
Well, of course. And by the way these Senate races go, particularly in battleground states, is the Senate races and the presidential races often go the same way. It's unusual for a candidate of the other party to win if his or her presidential candidate does not succeed in that state. There's only one candidate since 2020 who has defied that type of gravity. That was Susan Collins in Maine, where she won the state by, I think, 8 or 9 points, and Biden won it by 8 or 9 points. But other than that, we haven't seen any separation. So if you're a down ballot Republican in a state, particularly in a state like California or New York, where you're a Republican in the House, And you have a top of the ticket that is going to be beaten badly in those states. I'm not saying they're going to. I think it's going to be a very close election. Don't get me wrong. In the battleground states, I believe will still be very close. But if you're a Republican in California and New York right now, I can't be feeling too confident. If you're in one of those real marginal swing districts, this is not helping you because there's no infrastructure, Republican infrastructure in those states, because Trump clearly has no chance there. So that would be my big concern if I were a Republican down ballot in a non-red or a non-swing state or battleground state, in a difficult district. Could be very challenging.
Let's talk about a state that you're from. I happen to be from there too, and that's Pennsylvania. And we know how critical Pennsylvania is, especially to this election. It is a must-win state, 19 electoral votes on the line there. Do you think either candidate last night did a good job of explaining the issues, their stance on the issues, their policies that would really matter to Pennsylvania voters?
I think Pennsylvania voters are like most voters nationally. They're swayed by the same issues. I think Kamala Harris tried to explain her reversal of a position on fracking, which is a very big issue in Western Pennsylvania, especially. So she tried, but Trump really didn't capitalize on that. He should have said, "Oh yeah, but can you believe her? Is she sincere? What will she do when she's elected?" He didn't do any of that. I think that was, inflation, housing costs certainly are a big issue for younger voters in Pennsylvania. Of course, food prices have been exceedingly high for some time now. That's driving the economic angst in the Commonwealth, like much of the country. I was surprised that Harris didn't make more of an issue of January 6th. There they are at the Constitution Center, and about rule of law and peaceful transfers of power and all that. But that was I would say that I don't know that anybody landed any great punches about Pennsylvania specific issues last night. They're speaking to a larger audience.
Issues like the economy, like immigration, are top issues for voters, but they all are also weaker spots for Democrats. And it seemed like Harris had a strategy last night of, when confronted about those issues, she would say something in her answer that would bait Trump. And every time in his response, he would take the bait and fall for it and respond. And then that would kind of go on a tangent there. So do you think we got a good sense of policy from either of them?
Actually, I thought the overall the conversation was a little light on policy, particularly foreign policy. Not much discussion about China. I thought what was really interesting was the tariff conversation, where Harris pointed out that Trump's tariffs were going to cost consumers a lot of money. It was going to be very expensive. It was bad policy. And then Trump, in one of his few good moments, he retorted, "Well, then why didn't you repeal the tariffs I imposed when I was in?" And but there was never any real follow-up to that sort of thing. And so, I just thought that the substantive policy discussion really wasn't that great. And maybe that's partly on the moderators. But we get into so many side issues with Trump that it's hard to stay focused, I guess. But I thought the policy conversations were not particularly strong. Although, I say, except on women's health, I thought Harris was particularly strong and in her comfort zone, and really had Trump in a real predicament during that segment of the debate.
In our last conversation in June, we talked about how the Republican Party feels fractured right now, and there's this strong MAGA base, and there's also people like yourself that you described as dispirited Republicans. Today, after watching that debate, how do you think dispirited Republicans as well as independent voters are feeling and thinking?
Well, I think a lot of those dispirited Republicans are even more dispirited today after that debate, saying that this is our standard bearer, who really, again, couldn't make arguments, and that really resonated. And again, we get back to what we had talked about previously. At our Republican Legacy group I'm involved with, where are we out there? We're trying to get the party refocused on core principles, from the Constitution to the rule of law, to free markets, to fiscal discipline, to a sensible national security policy that embraces allies and rejects autocrats. And Donald Trump, couldn't really articulate why he couldn't say whether or not he supported Ukraine in this war. And so if you're a dispirited Republican, you're watching this saying, my goodness, I thought we stood for certain things. We don't stand for these these really punitive tariffs. We don't support Vladimir Putin. We, we certainly don't, like to engage in conspiracy theories talking about, are people eating pets in Springfield, Ohio, based on some who knows what noise somewhere where there's no proof. I mean, this is really hard for us, and that's why we those of us who are like-minded and represent apparently a minority within the Republican Party, but we need to make the argument that there are better policies, better principles, and the MAGA argument is a dead end and not going to get us or the party where we need to go. This type of populism, nativism, isolationism and protectionism is not sustainable for the long term. MAGA's been around for, maybe 8 years now, and the Republican Party and its core principles have been around for about 170 years, and we have much deeper roots, and we're not naive. We know we're not going back to where we were, but we need to get to a better place than where we are right now. And after last night's performance, I hope that will set off some alarm bells for guys like me.
What do you think guys like you should do then? Because I guess on the topic of dispirited Republicans, your former colleague, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, as well as her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney, last week endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. What's your reaction to that news?
Well, I'm not surprised. You say what you will about the Cheneys, but they have strong principles. Liz, we know where she stands on national security. She's, a bit of a defense hawk, and obviously against what Vladimir Putin is doing. She believes very much in the Constitution and the rule of law. We all know what she did rather heroically after January 6th. And so we know where Liz is, and Liz and Dick think that Donald Trump is a threat to the constitutional order and the rule of law. And that's why they're not supporting him. And, I've talked to other Republicans who said to me that they're not supporting Trump, after January 6th, and you're trying to overturn a free and fair election. Well, you lose a lot of people from your own team. And so maybe the Cheneys have set up a bit of a permission structure for Republicans who are disaffected and dispirited to either vote for Harris or simply not vote for Trump. So I think that's what they're doing. And this election is going to be won in the margins. And so every little thing helps or hurts. And so I think the Cheneys' endorsement could be impactful.
Do you think Trump and J.D. Vance and that team and other Republicans who are blowing off the Cheneys of the world, the Adam Kinzingers of the world, who are endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris, do you think that's going to hurt him come November?
I think it will hurt Trump that these people are out there speaking against him. Absolutely, it hurts him. And I think what's really sad about this, I serve with both Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, and they're good, honorable public servants, smart, thoughtful people. And what's really tragic is those two members have been ostracized. Those two prominent Republican congressmen and women have been ostracized. But those on the fringe, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and some others, they're normalized. They're brought into the fold. But I'll say the team normal folks are being pushed aside. They're really good, thoughtful people. And I mean, that's the real tragedy of this thing, that Adam and Liz are out and Marjorie Taylor Greene is in. And she's able to monetize that notoriety.
I know you told me last time that you aren't going to be voting for Donald Trump in this election. Do you think you're at the place about less than 60 days from the election where you would endorse Kamala Harris or at least vote for her?
Yeah, I'll be making a statement about that probably in the not too distant future. But yeah, I'm certainly not voting for Donald Trump. I've been very consistent about that. I didn't vote for him in 2016. I voted for Joe Biden in 2020. I was public. I put out an op-ed and explained the reasons why. I defended it on television. But here we are. We've had a very volatile political year. I was one of the guys trying to push no labels to put forward some kind of a centrist ticket at a time when, you may remember, people were really going after no labels because many of us were saying then that when it was Trump and Biden, that 2/3 of the American public thought one candidate was too old and the other too dangerous. And then many of the Democrats and their allies were really furious that they were, how dare you try to put up an alternative that will only help Trump? And we said, well, maybe you should run a better candidate. And then, they listened and they substituted him out. So this has been a really crazy political year. So Like I said, I'll probably have more to say about this in the not too distant future.
Well, we will be looking out for that. But as we sit here now, I mean, you've said we should be sounding the alarm bells. How do you think history is going to remember this moment? And what do you think the future is of the Republican Party, because the race is close?
Well, the future of the Republican Party could depend on a number of things. The outcome of this election. Look, as bad a performance as Trump delivered last night, this is still a very competitive election. He can win. So, if he does lose, the question is, will Republicans see this as an opportunity to pivot away from him? I certainly thought after January 6th, the party was in full pivot mode, and until it allowed him back in. And so I think after this election, and this is why our Republican legacy is going to stick around, we want to make sure that we have this debate, and I think it's going to be even more. It's going to be a louder debate. It's going to be a more vigorous debate after the election, particularly if Trump loses the presidency, and Republicans are going to have to stand there and say, "Here we go again." We haven't won a presidential race. It'll be the 4-year blip of Donald Trump, 8 years of Obama, and then you'll have 8 years of Biden Harris, and is this how we want to be known as a party? Is it maybe perhaps a regional party that can only win in certain areas, and we just don't have a broad enough national appeal? And we have not talked enough about how do we talk to independent and swing voters. And I get back to our core principles. The principles we have been espousing are not just principles that Republicans can embrace. These are principles that independents embrace, and frankly many Democrats embrace. But we have to be able to do that. And what I've seen in this campaign so far from Donald Trump, he's done nothing to reach out to the center of the country. He's simply doubled down on MAGA through his vice presidential selection and through most things he does and says. He's just simply talking to his base. He goes out there and he talks about Hannibal Lecter. He talks about all the grievances against him, January 6th, and pardoning the people who attacked the Capitol and all those police officers. These are not things that are really persuading independent voters who think maybe I'm not sure how I should vote. Oh, he's talking about that again. He's not doing anything to bring them into the fold. At least I can say for Kamala Harris, she's trying to bring people into the fold. She is trying to moderate, and she's taking some heat for it because she's having to reverse herself on the Green New Deal and Medicare for all and fracking and other issues. So, and that's the problem. I mean, like I said, they're serious about winning, the Democrats. That's why they substituted out Harris for Biden. That's why she's trying to moderate. The Republican Party, on the other hand, under Trump, isn't trying to moderate, isn't trying to reach out. It is simply doubling down on the base, and they think that's enough to get them through the election. And maybe it will, but the ceiling is very low. Trump hasn't gotten more than 47% of the vote. So why do we think he's going to do much better this time? The party needs to get over 50%, and we're just not there. So again, this conversation is only going to get louder and angrier if the party loses.
Well, Congressman, I hope the conversation can continue between you and I between now and Election Day. I really appreciate your thoughts today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. Great to be with you.